The clinking of silverware against fine china was a delicate symphony, a sound Amelia had orchestrated countless times. From the floral centerpiece to the precisely chilled white wine, every detail of the dinner party was a testament to her meticulous planning. It was for David, of course. Everything was always for David. His promotion to senior vice president at the firm was the reason for this celebration, and their guests were the top brass, including the man of the hour himself, the company's CEO, Mr. Blackwood. Amelia drifted between conversations, a gracious hostess ensuring every glass was full, every guest comfortable. She smiled as David held court at the head of the table, his voice booming with confidence as he recounted a recent successful merger. He was charming, no one could deny it, with an easy laugh and a magnetic presence that had drawn her in years ago. But as the night wore on, a familiar, subtle ache began to settle in her chest. It was the ache of invisibility. "You have a beautiful home, Mrs. Thompson," Mr. Blackwood remarked, his voice a low, pleasant rumble that cut through the surrounding chatter. He had a surprisingly gentle demeanor for a man who commanded a multi-billion-dollar empire. His eyes, sharp and intelligent, held no hint of the casual condescension she often received from David's colleagues. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. Please, call me Amelia," she replied, her smile genuine for the first time that evening. "Amelia, then," he nodded. "David is a true asset to our company. His recent investment strategies have been remarkably insightful." A flicker of something, pride, mixed with a familiar sting of resentment, sparked within her. David was indeed good at his job, but the insightful strategies he was being lauded for were not entirely his own. They were born from late-night discussions across their kitchen table, from hours of research she conducted while he was asleep, from her innate understanding of market trends that she had cultivated over years of quiet, dedicated study. David, overhearing the compliment, sauntered over, placing a proprietary hand on Amelia's shoulder. "She's the secret to my success, Blackwood," he said with a wide grin. "Keeps the house running like a well-oiled machine so I can focus on the big picture. Don't you, darling?" The endearment was a barb, disguised as a compliment. Amelia felt her smile tighten. Mr. Blackwood's gaze shifted from David to her, a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. "I'm sure she does more than that," Mr. Blackwood said smoothly. "A supportive partner is invaluable." "What is it you do, Amelia? Are you in finance as well?" Before Amelia could form a reply, David laughed. It was a loud, dismissive sound that made her flinch. "Oh no," he boomed, waving a hand dismissively. "Amelia, she's just a housewife. The best one a man could ask for, but a housewife nonetheless." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Just a housewife. The phrase echoed in the sudden silence that fell around them. It was a label he had applied to her for years, sometimes jokingly, sometimes as a term of endearment. But tonight, in front of the man who held her husband's career in his hands, it felt like a branding. It was a dismissal of every book she'd read, every market report she'd analyzed, every sacrifice she'd made. It was a neat, tidy box into which he had packed her entire identity, sealing it shut so his own could shine brighter. She saw a flash of something unreadable in Mr. Blackwood's eyes as he looked at her. It wasn't pity, but something sharper, more assessing. The warmth in the room seemed to cool, the cheerful symphony of the dinner party fading into a dull, monotonous drone. Her heart, which had been filled with a quiet pride for David's accomplishments, now felt like a leaden weight in her chest. She had poured her intellect, her intuition, and her energy into their shared life, believing they were a team. But in that one moment, with 4 simple words, David had made it painfully clear that in his story, she was just a supporting character, destined to remain in the background, forever unseen. The smile on her face remained, a perfect porcelain mask, but behind it, a quiet revolution was beginning to stir. The words, "just a housewife," seemed to suck the very air from her lungs, leaving a vacuum where her composure had been. Amelia's smile, however, remained fixed, a marvel of social engineering she had perfected over 15 years of marriage. She waited for the sting of humiliation to subside, for someone to change the subject, for the ground to swallow her whole. David, oblivious, simply beamed, as if he had just paid her the highest of compliments. But the moment didn't pass. Instead of letting the awkwardness fester, Mr. Blackwood simply smiled at Amelia, his gaze never leaving her face. It was a look of genuine inquiry, as if David hadn't spoken at all. "A housewife, then," he said, his tone even and thoughtful. "A role far more complex than CEO, I assure you. It requires a skill set most of us in the boardroom lack." He paused, then leaned in slightly, his voice lowering conspiratorially. "David mentioned his insightful investment strategies. I've been particularly intrigued by the recent volatility in the renewable energy sector, specifically in residential solar solutions. It's a bubble, in my opinion, but some of my analysts disagree. Do you happen to follow it? It was a lifeline, a direct question, addressed to her, about a topic she had spent the last 3 months researching obsessively. David opened his mouth to interject, likely to make another joke about her reading home and garden magazines, but Amelia spoke first. I do, actually, she said, her voice clear and steady, surprising even herself. I find it fascinating. It's a bit of a hobby. She felt a surge of courage. I agree that it seems like a bubble, but I don't think the entire sector is overvalued. The issue isn't the technology, but the financing models. The companies relying on aggressive, long-term leasing agreements are facing significant headwinds with rising interest rates. Their customer acquisition costs are unsustainable. She took a small sip of her wine, feeling Mr. Blackwood's undivided attention on her. But if you look at the component manufacturers, especially those innovating in battery storage and efficiency, their valuations are much more grounded. There's a small, privately held company in Germany, Sonnenkraft Energy, that has developed a new type of perovskite solar cell that's almost twice as efficient as a standard silicon one. They're still in the late stages of funding. If they go public or are acquired, the company that backs them won't be buying into a bubble. They'll be investing in the future of the industry. Silence. A different kind of silence this time. Not of awkwardness, but of surprise. David stared at her, his mouth agape, a look of utter bewilderment on his face. He had heard her mention these things in passing, of course, but had always dismissed them as idle chatter, the background noise to his more important world. Mr. Blackwood's eyebrows were raised, a slow, appreciative smile spreading across his face. Sonnenkraft Energy, he repeated softly, as if tasting the words. I haven't heard of them. My people haven't brought them to my attention. See? David finally sputtered, recovering with a nervous laugh. She's a smart one. Picks up all sorts of things, my secret weapon. He tried to reclaim the moment, but the dynamic had irrevocably shifted. The spotlight he had so carefully cultivated for himself was now, inexplicably, shining on his wife. For the rest of the evening, Mr. Blackwood made a point of including Amelia in the conversation. He didn't ask her about recipes or decorating. He asked for her opinion on global supply chains, on the future of remote work, on emerging tech markets. And with each thoughtful, well-researched answer she gave, she could feel a part of her, long dormant, waking up. When the guests finally began to depart, Mr. Blackwood was the last to leave. He shook David's hand warmly, congratulating him again on the promotion. Then he turned to Amelia. He took her hand, but it wasn't the light, polite touch of a departing guest. His grip was firm, respectful. Amelia, he said, his sharp eyes holding hers. It was a true pleasure. You have a remarkable mind. After the door closed, the house fell silent. David was giddy with success, pacing the living room with a glass of scotch. I think that went well, don't you? Blackwood was eating out of my hand, he exclaimed, completely oblivious to the real events of the evening. Amelia said nothing. She moved through the room, collecting empty glasses, her movements calm and deliberate. The perfect housewife. But inside, the quiet revolution had found its voice. It was no longer a stir of resentment, but a clear, cold resolve. David hadn't just dismissed her. He had underestimated her. And as she looked at him, still basking in his reflected glory, she knew with absolute certainty that he was about to learn just how significant that mistake was. The name he had given her, just a housewife, was not an insult. It was her greatest advantage. In the days that followed the dinner party, a strange quiet settled over their house. It wasn't a comfortable silence, but a charged one. David, still coasting on the high of his perceived success, was more boisterous than ever. He spoke of his future at the firm not in terms of possibility, but of inevitability. He was a man on the rise, and he saw Amelia's newfound quietness as a reflection of his own brilliance. A woman so content with her lot, so satisfied by her husband's achievements that she had no need for words. He was wrong. Amelia's silence was not contentment, it was concentration. His dismissive words, just a housewife, had not broken her. They had unlocked her. The label he thought was a cage had become her camouflage. While he saw her reading on the patio, he imagined she was perusing a novel. In reality, she was poring over German financial regulations and technical papers on perovskite cell degradation rates. When he saw her on the laptop in the kitchen, he assumed she was ordering groceries or planning their next social engagement. Instead, she was building a sophisticated financial model, projecting Sonnenkraft Energy's potential growth trajectory over the next decade. Every hour she had once dedicated to perfecting their life, a life designed to be the perfect backdrop for his career, was now being repurposed. She worked with a quiet, fierce intensity she hadn't felt in years. The house remained immaculate. The dinners were still exquisite, but these tasks were now secondary, performed with an efficiency that freed up precious hours. She was a ghost in her own home, her most important work happening in the shadows, on a password-protected laptop fueled by coffee and a burning desire to prove him and herself wrong. One evening, David found her in the study, surrounded by papers she'd printed. He glanced at the complex charts and dense text, a frown creasing his brow. "What's all this, honey? Planning a trip?" "Something like that," Amelia replied calmly, not looking up. "Just doing a bit of research." He chuckled, patting her on the head as one would a diligent child. "Don't strain that pretty little head of yours too much. Why don't you take a break? Go buy a new dress for the country club gala next month. On me." He pulled a credit card from his wallet and slid it onto the desk. "My treat. For being the best hostess in town." It was the casual, unthinking condescension that solidified her resolve. He didn't see her. He saw a domestic accessory, an extension of his own success. She looked at the credit card after he left, his name embossed in bold silver letters. She slid it back, untouched. She wouldn't use his money for this. This had to be hers and hers alone. The following week, she put her plan into motion. Getting a direct line to a CEO like John Blackwood was nearly impossible. His executive assistants were gatekeepers of the highest order, but Amelia wasn't trying to get through the main gate. During her years as a corporate wife, she had learned that information was currency, and she had become an expert at observation. She remembered Mr. Blackwood mentioning his passion for restoring vintage sailboats. A few hours of deep diving into sailing forums and yacht club publications led her to a charity regatta he was sponsoring the following weekend. She didn't go to the regatta to confront him. That would be too forward, too desperate. Instead, she found what she was looking for: the events program. And in that program, listed under the primary sponsor's message, was a direct personal email address for John Blackwood, one reserved for his philanthropic endeavors, likely monitored less stringently than his corporate one. It was a long shot, but it was a shot. That night, after David was sound asleep, Amelia sat at her laptop, the house dark and silent around her. She drafted the email a dozen times, refining every word. It had to be perfect, respectful but confident, insightful but concise. Subject: a follow-up on renewable energy. Dear Mr. Blackwood, it was a pleasure speaking with you at the dinner party last week. Your question regarding the renewable energy sector has stayed with me. As a follow-up to our brief conversation, I have taken the liberty of compiling a high-level investment thesis on a privately held German company, Sonnenkraft Energy, which I believe represents a unique and undervalued opportunity in the solar component space. My research suggests their proprietary perovskite cell technology has the potential to disrupt the market significantly within the next 3 to 5 years. I have attached a brief prospectus I prepared. Should you find it of interest, I would be happy to provide the more detailed financial models and technical analyses that support my conclusions. Thank you for your time. Sincerely, Amelia Thompson. Her finger hovered over the send button for a full minute. This was it. This was the point of no return. She wasn't just a housewife sending an email. She was an investor making a pitch. With a deep breath, she clicked. The email vanished into the digital ether. She closed the laptop, her heart hammering against her ribs. The silence of the house no longer felt like concentration. It felt like the held breath before a storm. The 2 days following the email's departure were a unique form of torture. Every ping from her phone, every new email notification, sent a jolt of adrenaline through Amelia's system, followed by a wave of disappointment. She went through the motions of her life: grocery shopping, paying bills, arranging a flower delivery for a friend's birthday, all while a frantic internal monologue ran on a loop. Had she been too forward? Was her research as solid as she thought? Had his personal email been a decoy, a digital trash can for unsolicited messages? David, meanwhile, remained blissfully unaware. He announced one evening that he'd booked them a 2-week trip to Tuscany. "You deserve it, darling," he'd said, kissing the top of her head. "All your hard work keeping this house together. Time for my little housewife to put her feet up and drink some wine." He meant it to be generous, but the words grated on her raw nerves. She was not a pet to be rewarded with a treat. She was a professional in waiting, and she was waiting for a sign. The sign came on a Wednesday afternoon. She was in the kitchen, wiping down the marble countertops when her laptop chimed. It was an email from an address she didn't recognize. J. Blackwood, exec. Her breath caught in her throat. Her hands, damp from the sponge, trembled as she clicked it open. The message was brief, stripped of all pleasantries. Mrs. Thompson, thank you for this. Your prospectus is compelling. My team and I would like to discuss your findings further. Are you available to meet at my office this Friday at 10 a.m.? John Blackwood Amelia read it 3 times. It was real. It was happening. A dizzying wave of vindication washed over her, so potent it made her lean against the counter for support. He hadn't just read it. He had taken it seriously. He had shown it to his team. When David came home that evening, she had already composed her story. I have a charity luncheon to go to on Friday, she said casually as she served him dinner. It's for the Children's Hospital Foundation. We're planning the annual gala. It was a plausible lie, built on the framework of the life he expected her to lead. Oh, right, good, he said, his attention already on the stock market report on his tablet. Wear the blue dress, the one I like. On Friday morning, she did not wear the blue dress. She chose a tailored charcoal gray suit she had bought years ago but seldom wore. It was the armor of a businesswoman, not the attire of a hostess. Her research, printed and bound in a professional black folder, was her weapon. As she drove into the city, she wasn't nervous. She was focused. This was not a social call. It was a business meeting, and she was more prepared for it than she had been for anything in her life. Mr. Blackwood's office was on the top floor, a sprawling space with panoramic views of the city. He wasn't alone. 2 other people were in the room, a man and a woman, both with sharp eyes and stern expressions. They were introduced as the heads of his acquisitions and analytics departments. This was no courtesy meeting. This was a vetting. Amelia, thank you for coming in, Mr. Blackwood said, gesturing for her to sit at the large conference table. As I said, your proposal was unexpected, but intriguing. My team has some questions. For the next hour, they grilled her. The questions were relentless, digging into every assumption in her model. They challenged her growth projections, her currency risk calculations, her understanding of German patent law. They were testing her, trying to find the cracks in her housewife facade. But there were no cracks. Amelia met every question with a calm, detailed response. She didn't just present data. She told a story of innovation, of market dynamics, of a future he hadn't yet seen. She knew the degradation rate of the perovskite cells, the backgrounds of Sonnencraft's key engineers, the financial health of their primary suppliers. Her knowledge wasn't superficial. It was profound. She had lived and breathed this company for months. She saw the moment the tide turned. The woman, the head of analytics, had been asking a particularly pointed series of questions about the company's burn rate. Amelia walked her through her cash flow analysis, pointing to a specific under-the-radar government subsidy she had uncovered that would extend their operational runway by an additional 8 months. The woman leaned back in her chair, a look of grudging respect on her face. She made a note on her pad and gave Mr. Blackwood a subtle nod. When it was over, a silence fell over the room. Mr. Blackwood steepled his fingers, his eyes fixed on her. The mask of the impassive CEO was gone, replaced by a look of undisguised admiration. Mrs. Thompson, he began, his voice low and serious. In my 25 years as CEO, I have had hundreds of investment proposals cross my desk, from Ivy League MBAs, from seasoned analysts, from the biggest banks on Wall Street. I can say, without any exaggeration, that your unsolicited thesis on this small German company is one of the most thorough, insightful, and compelling I have ever seen. He paused, letting the weight of his words fill the room. My team agrees. This is a significant opportunity. We want to move on it, and we want to move quickly. But, he leaned forward, his gaze locking onto hers, I'm not interested in simply buying your idea. I'm interested in partnering with the mind that created it. We need someone to lead this acquisition, someone who understands it from the inside out. That person is you. The offer hung in the air, thick with the scent of possibility. Lead this acquisition. It wasn't a compliment or a courtesy. It was a coronation. For a fleeting second, the image of her life, the pristine house, the social calendar, the carefully planned dinners, flashed before Amelia's eyes. It was a life of reflected glory, comfortable and safe. But it was a gilded cage, and the door had just been thrown wide open. Amelia looked past Mr. Blackwood, at the city skyline stretching out behind him. It was a world she had observed from a distance for 15 years. Now, she was being invited to help build a piece of it. Yes, she said, her voice betraying no hint of the seismic shift happening within her. Yes, I would be interested in that. A slow smile spread across Mr. Blackwood's face. Excellent. My legal team will draw up a consulting contract. This will be your project. You will report directly to me. The drive home was surreal. The familiar streets of her suburban neighborhood seemed foreign, like a set from a play she was no longer a part of. When she walked through the door, David was pacing in the living room, a storm cloud on his face. "Where have you been?" he snapped. "Your luncheon was supposed to end hours ago. I called the hospital foundation. They haven't had an event in weeks." Amelia placed her keys calmly on the hall table. The time for lies was over. "I wasn't at a luncheon, David. I was in a meeting with John Blackwood." David stared at her, his anger momentarily replaced by confusion. "Blackwood? Why would you meet with him?" Then a flicker of suspicion. "Did something happen? Is it about my promotion?" "No," Amelia said, meeting his gaze. "It was about an investment pitch, one that I made." She paused, letting the words sink in. "I presented my research on a German solar company. He was impressed. He's offered me a contract to lead the acquisition." David's face went through a rapid series of emotions: bewilderment, disbelief, and then a dark, rising tide of fury. He let out a short, incredulous laugh. "You? You pitched Blackwood? On that little hobby of yours? Don't be ridiculous, Amelia." "It's not ridiculous, and it's not a hobby," she said, her voice like steel. He took it seriously. "It's happening." "You went behind my back," he hissed, his voice low and menacing. "You used my connection to get in the door." "I did no such thing," she retorted, her own anger finally rising to the surface. "You think I'm incapable of making my own connections? You made it perfectly clear what you think of me. This was my work, David. Mine alone." His face contorted, a sneer twisting his lips. "And what are you going to do? Play businesswoman? You have no idea how this world works. You'll be eaten alive. You need me to protect you, to guide you." It was then that Amelia understood. He wasn't just angry. He was terrified. He was losing control. Her success didn't just challenge his ego. It threatened the very foundation of his identity, which was built on the belief in her dependency. A week later, the contract was ready. Mr. Blackwood, with a shrewd understanding of the situation, suggested a dinner to finalize the agreement, and he insisted David be there. "It's best to have all stakeholders aligned," he had said, a subtle glint in his eye. David, seeing it as his chance to reassert his authority, readily agreed. The dinner was at an exclusive, wood-paneled restaurant, the kind of place David considered his natural habitat. He immediately took charge, ordering the wine, guiding the conversation, and positioning himself as the seasoned veteran, generously allowing his wife a seat at the table. "I have to say, John, I was surprised when Amelia told me," David began, swirling his wine. "But I always encourage her to pursue her little projects. Keeps her mind sharp. Of course, when it comes to the heavy lifting, the negotiations, the financial structuring, that's where I'll step in. She's the strategist. I'm the execution." Amelia remained silent, watching the charade unfold. "It's a wonderful arrangement, really," David continued, placing a patronizing hand on her arm. "This way, she gets to be involved in a big, important project, but she doesn't have to worry her pretty head about the details. She can still focus on what matters. You know, running the house, planning our Tuscany trip. It's perfect. You're just a housewife," I used to joke, but there's a truth to it. It's a full-time job." Mr. Blackwood slowly placed his knife and fork on his plate. The quiet sound echoed in the space between them. He looked at David, his expression unreadable. Then he turned his gaze to Amelia, a look of profound respect in his eyes. "David," he said, his voice quiet but carrying immense weight, "I think you misunderstand the nature of this arrangement." He picked up a leather-bound folder that contained the contract and slid it across the table toward Amelia. "Your firm may have a peripheral role in the due diligence, and for that you will be compensated fairly. But my primary contract, the leadership of this entire multi-million-dollar acquisition, is with her." He looked directly at David, his voice dropping to a cool, decisive tone that left no room for argument. "I'm not partnering with your wife because you're my employee. I am partnering with her because, between the two of you, she is the real investor." The words landed like a judge's gavel. David froze, his face a mask of pale, slack-jawed shock. The color drained from his cheeks. The charming, confident man who had held court at his own dinner party just weeks before was gone, replaced by a hollow shell. He had built his world on the pedestal of her supposed simplicity, and in one sentence, that world had been demolished. Amelia looked at the man opposite her, the man she had spent 15 years supporting, and felt nothing. Not anger, not even pity. Just a profound sense of distance. She signed the contract with a firm, steady hand, her signature a declaration of independence. Her revolution was complete. That night, she packed a bag. She didn't need to take much. The woman who lived in that house, surrounded by beautiful, meaningless things, was no longer her. The label he had given her, just a housewife, had been her prison, but it had also been her liberation. Because while he was busy looking at the housewife, he never saw the investor standing right beside him,